First of all, of course, I need to thank the organizer for putting together such a nice event and for putting up with having me on stage once again. Since I spoke here last year, a few things have changed, right? We've had quite an eventful market. Some good events, some bad events, but all of them made for a rocky year. I personally think that in the end, the various scandals that we had, be it Anchor, FTX, or others, they are eventually a net positive for the industry and what we're trying to build. But I'm not going to speak about the last 12 months today. I don't want to discuss what happened last year. I don't want to take you back to 2022. As a matter of fact, I want to take you back a little further. And very precisely, I want us to go to 1946. And I want us to get out of this room and actually go outside in the street in 1946. And you will find it's a very different world, right? Some roads didn't have tarmac. There was no highways, no driving tests, no seat belts. The fastest car in the world just reached the astonishing speed of 160 km per hour. And in some places, there were horses on the street. So if you compare that to today, you would admit that it's quite a different reality, right? And you would find it quite absurd to use today the exact same rules as we did back then. For a very good reason, which is that the realities are so different, there's no reason the rules should be the same. And yet, this is what we do in the biggest market in the world when it comes to our financial markets. If you look in the US, largest financial market in the world, one of the lead jurisdictions, what matters to understand whether your asset is regulated or not is to understand if that asset is a security. To determine if the asset is a security, the regulator uses the Howey test, which, you've guessed it, was introduced in 1946. If, according to the Howey test, you are deemed to be a security, you then fall under the Security Act, which was introduced in 1933. So basically, this is where we are when it comes to digital assets in the US. You have on one side a great new technology that you can be seen here in the back of the picture that actually allows you to solve many problems that the previous technology did not allow you to solve, previous technology being in the front. And yet, regulators continue to try to marginally adapt regulatory frameworks instead of rethinking new ones. But the reality is that those frameworks were initially designed in a paradigm where you had to establish trust between centralized third parties. Establishing that trust is very hard, and it becomes harder and harder as the markets grow and become more complicated. And so we had to put together an extraordinarily complicated market infrastructure, which is the infrastructure of financial markets today. And this infrastructure had to be regulated with certain frameworks that grew alongside the infrastructure itself. But the thing is that we are now at a point of disruption. We have a new technology, decentralized ledger technology, that actually allows you to solve many of the problems that created the complexity of the market by removing the need for trust. And it's very important that regulators acknowledge that disruption and actually go away from small incremental changes to a new way of thinking about our regulatory frameworks. And there's three things that I want to speak about today. The first one is why the new technology, in the back, is better than the previous one. The second is why current frameworks are completely outdated. And the third is looking at where we currently stand in Europe and what is ahead of us. So no more horses. So why is the new technology better than the previous one? If you look at tokenized assets, the new technology, you have assets that are fractionable. Traditional assets are not. So you can buy 1/10,000,000th of a Bitcoin, you cannot buy half a share. Why should you care? Well, if you don't have much money to invest, you can invest however much you like. And this may sound quite of a small advantage in Western Europe, where we have the privilege of being, on average, quite wealthy and where one share is affordable. But if you take a broader stand and look at the entire world, this is actually a tremendous advantage to remove barriers to entry and to increase the access to capital freedom. Tokenized assets are available 24/7. Traditional assets are not. You're constrained by intermediaries. Why should you care? Well, with tokenized assets, you can now transact and have control over your value, your asset, whenever you like. Sure, when everything is nice, you can wait until tomorrow 9 a.m. when markets open. You don't care. But you don't know when a crisis is going to hit. You don't know when it's going to be a public crisis, when it's going to be volatility coming in, when it's going to be a private event, a private crisis that makes you want to access your value right now. This is an advantage that you have with tokenized assets. Tokenized assets are borderless, which traditional assets are not. They are tied to geographies. Why does it matter? Well, I don't know if you've tried sending money abroad recently, but I just moved to Switzerland and I had to send some money from a Belgian bank to a Swiss bank. I'm not going to name my Belgian bank, ING, but it basically cost me 30 euros to send that money. It took 4 business days. I had to pay 2% on the FX rate, and they actually asked me to pay another 30 euros if I wanted to have confirmation that the wire was sent. So when you take that into account, I would say that borderless assets, they're actually kind of nice. And that's just half of it. Tokenized assets, you have immediate transfer. Traditional assets, T+1, +2, +3. Again, why do slow something that should be fast? A tokenized asset, you can self-custody. You can decide to trust yourself. A traditional asset, you cannot. You need to go through regulated custodians. Why should you care? Again, when everything is fine, it's nice to trust others. But when others are not so trustworthy, what do? It's nice to have an option. With tokenized assets, you have it. And then finally, they're programmable. Traditional assets are not. Why should you care? Because with programmability, you can automate many simple tasks and therefore reduce the cost of the services that you employ. Now, you will have noticed I haven't said the word crypto once. The reason for it is that this isn't about the sugar, the flashy glazing on top of the donut. This is about the actual donut. This is about why it makes sense to digitally represent value and to exchange it through tokenized markets. Now, crypto, of course. Cryptos create friction because they are the first of their kind. Cryptos are the first digital assets. So when you discuss crypto, you are going to hear the usual stuff. All of this crypto nonsense is just a scam. It's not regulated. Why don't they just follow the existing frameworks? Come in and comply, to borrow the word of Mr. Gensler. The reality is that the frameworks that we're meant to comply with are simply outdated. They were designed at a time to basically circumvent the shortcomings of non-digital assets. Those shortcomings are now addressed, so we are stuck with outdated frameworks. To show it, I think the best is to go through examples and to go through them using MiFID II. So if you look at securities in MiFID II, securities are rights of ownership, recognized at the level of the custody account keepers. You cannot self-custody. You must trust third parties. Securities must be settled in cash through central or commercial bank. What if you don't want cash? What if you don't trust the commercial bank? What if you don't trust the central bank? Tough luck. Settlement of securities must be made by accredited third parties. You cannot benefit from the reduced cost of having automated clearing and settlement. And securities are traded on venues which must be entities with legal personality. The concept of decentralized exchange is completely excluded. So we have something that is clearly outdated. Now, it cannot be all negative, right? If you look at the last few weeks, last few months, with MiCA coming to reality, with some rather backwards regulatory actions in the US, Europe has been presented as a pioneer in regulating digital assets. I would personally think that saying that Europe is a pioneer in regulating digital assets is actually true. But I would also say that in the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So the question is, what do we have today, and what do we still need? Digital assets are a very wide concept that potentially cover a very wide scope. Of course, you have utility tokens, you have stable coins, you have altcoins, and I call them altcoins here to be polite because, this is being recorded. But you also have different things. You have patents, potentially, that would be digital assets, gaming assets, art, and others that we haven't even thought about. And more importantly, the elephant in the room, you have all financial instruments that will eventually all be digital. Today in Europe, we have 2 main frameworks, regulatory frameworks. We have MiCA. MiCA covers about half of what crypto is. Why half? Because it's only centralized. It doesn't touch decentralized finance. And then you have the DLT framework, which basically establishes exemptions to MiFID II so that institutions can emit digital financial instruments. But it does so in a very limited scope. So it's a limited coverage, but of course, they have strength, which is why Europe is a leader. It their main strength actually is to exist, which is quite big in and out of itself. But MiCA gives clarity, gives a level playing field, board accountability, information obligation. It creates market integrity. And the DLT pilot regime gives us legal certainty, supports innovation, and reduces incompatibilities between MiFID II and the advantage of this technology. But you guessed it, they also have shortcomings. In MiCA, DeFi does not exist, DAOs do not exist, NFTs do not exist. The issuance of tokens is regulated, but their usage isn't. In DLT pilot regime, you have a 6 years testing period, which is incredibly long when you look at the speed of innovation on digital assets, and you have a cap of 6 billion. 6 billion sounds like a big number. To put it into perspective, fixed income and equities in Europe is 40 trillion. So the cap that is established by the DLT pilot regime is 0.015% of the current market for the next 6 years. So yes, the coverage is rather limited. So if you take the limited coverage and the fact that even within that coverage, there are shortcomings, how can we conclude? I think we have two options. Either we say that we suck, or we say that we have a great opportunity. Of course, it would be great for innovation to go slower, because we could adapt the frameworks step by step, slowly and steadily, as we always have. But innovation is not getting any slower. Not in a digital world, not in a decentralized world. It's getting a lot faster. You have thousands of teams everywhere in the world with very low barriers to entry, building new things, building new assets, building new protocols, new venues to exchange those assets. They don't care that you're meant to use a commercial bank because some of them don't trust a commercial bank. They don't care that you need to use a centralized custodian for the same reasons. So what do? Do we just accept that we suck? Of course not. I think that we have a tremendous opportunity, but we need to have a very strong political will and political support to go away from small, steady, incremental changes and actually go into greenfield thinking when it comes to our regulatory framework. DLT is an extraordinary opportunity to simplify market infrastructure, to reduce costs, to increase efficiency. And it is an incredible opportunity that we must seize to radically change the way we exchange value, all the while continuing to protect consumers and market participants. At Keyrock, we target all digital assets. The vision of the company is that every single asset will eventually be digital and that we will provide liquidity to every single one of them. Of course, you have to start somewhere. So given the current framework, we're starting on crypto, and today we provide liquidity on more than 400 markets, 24/7, everywhere in the world. But as I said, our vision is broader than crypto. So we also work with incredible partners, one of them Credix, another Belgian company, on the tokenization of SME loans. We work with Circle, a rather larger company, on the liquidity of stablecoins. We work with all those market participants. And this is something that we are very strongly committed to continue to do, working with the private sector, working with the public sector and the regulator to make sure that we can collectively seize this opportunity to radically disrupt how we exchange value. Thank you very much.